It's time to get back to Tennessee football and some college football. Rooting interest for the Vols this week in college football. Now, for Tennessee, the most important thing, win and you're in. Beat Vanderbilt and you're in, and you see what happens there. And yeah, you shouldn't focus on any of these games if you're Tennessee. They had a slow start last week against Utah, largely because I think many of the fans and players were focused on the other games. So this time, win and you're in. That is the key for Tennessee. And that's how we're going to get to this with rooting interest for the Vols. All right, so we're going to start with we're not going to go tiers this time because some of the lesser tiers that I used to do just don't mean the same. So really, it's just every game they should root for this year, this weekend. Every game they should root for, and let's get rolling. The first one they should probably root for is, again, this is a probably because we don't know how it's going to end up in the end, but I'm going to say Auburn over Alabama. Now, you would say, yeah, but doesn't Alabama need to be a quality win for Tennessee? And I would say not at this point. Tennessee's in. That's not going to hurt Tennessee too much. What you don't want is Alabama getting back into the college football playoff, guys. Alabama can be dangerous, okay? They can be dangerous. And so I think maybe root for Auburn over Alabama, but that's just a maybe. It's not a big deal. Don't take that one seriously. Here's who you should root for outside of that. This is to help Tennessee strength the schedule, okay? I'm going to name the teams to help Tennessee strength the schedule. But they don't really affect where Tennessee stands in the college football playoff rankings. They just give Tennessee a better boost when they try to make their claim that they should be a higher seed or over certain teams that whine. So it's for bragging rights. Root for Mississippi State over Ole Miss, even though that won't matter. It's not like Mississippi State will have a winning team, but just root for them for the heck of it. Root for Kentucky over Louisville. Kentucky will be 5-7 at that point, one spot out of the playoff. Now, root heavily for Florida over Florida State, because then Tennessee didn't just beat a bowl-eligible team. They beat a 7-5 team. A 7-win team looks a lot better than a 6-win team. So root like heck for Florida over Florida State. Root for, and by the way, Florida would be 7-5 with the toughest schedule in college football history, maybe. So it could be the equivalent of 9-3. Root for Oklahoma over LSU. Yes, you want to root for Oklahoma over LSU because then Oklahoma finishes 7-5. And again, 7-5 teams look a lot better than 6-6 teams. The same reason you should root for Arkansas over Missouri. All of a sudden, Arkansas is a 7-win team and Tennessee has no bad losses on the year. If you're Tennessee, you don't want to be the reason a team got to a bowl game instead of finishing 5-7. Tennessee did that twice, funny enough, in 2016, I believe, when they lost to South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Help both teams go 6-6, help both coaches extend their careers at those schools. Will Muschamp and Derek Mason. You don't want to be that guy. And then NC State over UNC. That's to get them to 6-6. They should have gotten to 6-6 last week, but blew it against Georgia Tech. But if they can beat UNC to get to 6-6, and UNC did just fire Mac Brown, there could be some emotions there. We don't know how that'll affect anything. If that happens, Tennessee would then be able to claim that they have played, I would believe, if NC State wins over the weekend, Tennessee, having played Vanderbilt, will be able to claim that they have played 7 teams that are bowl eligible this year. And if the other 3 go the way I'm talking about, then they can claim they've played 5 teams that finished with a winning record. That's a really good resume, and that stands out. So those are the big ones. All right. Next one. This involves Tennessee's college football playoff, let's say, positioning, or teams that they just want to avoid playing in the playoff. How about that? These are just teams they want to avoid playing in the playoff in general. Clemson, South Carolina, I'm leaving that one out because I'm not so sure who they want to play in the playoff. I don't think that one's relevant to Tennessee. So let's get to the other ones. You want Boise State to beat Oregon State. Why do you want Boise State to beat Oregon State? Because you want Boise State, Memphis, or Tulane to get into the college football playoff because you don't want Army or Navy getting in, and Army or Navy still could get in. That's a very bad matchup for anybody that's involved. Everybody in the playoff wants Army and Navy not getting in. I think Navy's out of it at this point. Army just has 1 loss, though. So they could stake a claim that they belong. That would be the scariest thing if you're Tennessee. You wouldn't face them in the first round, but you could face them at some point down the line if they pull off an upset. Now, Army has dropped from the rankings, but they could move up. You don't want them. You'd rather face UNLV, Tulane, Boise State, or probably Memphis is the other group of 5 team getting in. Funny enough, Boise State's going to get a first-round bye at this point, but you want one of those teams. You desperately don't want Army making any noise. All right, so there's that. How about Georgia Tech over Georgia? Just because you want Georgia getting out of the you just want Georgia being knocked out of the college football playoff. I mean, There's truth with that. You just want Georgia being knocked out. So Georgia Tech over Georgia is a big one. You really want that happening for your positioning. And then these are a couple of odd ones, but SMU over Cal and Miami over Syracuse. You want chalk with the ACC. Now, let me explain why. It's clear Tennessee is going to finish ahead of both of them. What you don't want to see happen is one of those teams win, probably Miami, most notably Miami. You don't want to see Miami win and SMU lose, and then Miami play Clemson for the ACC title, and Clemson wins, and then Clemson gets in, and they could be a bigger threat to Tennessee than SMU, and 2 ACC teams get in. You don't want that situation. So you want both of these teams to win just to make sure that there aren't 2 ACC teams getting in, because that could affect Tennessee's seeding. So you want to root for both teams, but most notably, you want SMU over Cal. That's who you really want to win. Honestly, if Syracuse beats Miami, that's not a big deal, because if SMU beats Cal and Syracuse beats Miami, well, then SMU plays Clemson for the ACC title, and if Clemson wins, SMU's probably out. But you don't really want Clemson getting in because they're a dangerous team, truth be told. The show brought to you by Double D Piping. I'm about to tell you the games you should be focused on the most to try to hope that you could see Tennessee get the 8th seed and home field advantage. Again, once again, the show brought to you by Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
Alrighty, now here are the biggest games to pay attention to if you are a Tennessee fan this weekend. There's 4. If any of these 4 teams lose, you can benefit. The first that I think is the least likely, but I put them in this tier, maybe I shouldn't have, is Michigan over Ohio State. If Michigan beats Ohio State and then Ohio State potentially loses to Oregon in the Big Ten title game, then Tennessee could leapfrog Ohio State, which would get them the 8th seed in the home playoff spot, and they wouldn't have to play Georgia. Me personally, if Ohio State loses to Michigan, I would still have Ohio State ahead of Tennessee, because I think even though technically Tennessee's strength of schedule is tougher, their strength of schedule and then there's quality wins. And the resume of beating Penn State and Indiana and only losing by 1 at Oregon kind of outweighs losing by 14 to Georgia and beating Alabama. It just does. So there's that. But let's talk about the 3 that could help Tennessee the most. Maryland over Penn State. The most impossible game, not going to happen. Maryland's not beating Penn State at Penn State, but if they do, Tennessee will absolutely move ahead of Penn State. Penn State has no quality wins. You could actually see Penn State get knocked out of the college football playoff at that point if Maryland pulls that out. They're not going to pull it out. Maryland's a bad team this year, but if they do beat Penn State, Tennessee moves up to the 8th seed. USC over Notre Dame. Again, USC beats Notre Dame. Tennessee moves up to the 8th seed. That would be a huge boost for Tennessee if they can move up to the 8th seed. They would get to get a home playoff game. And again, if Tennessee gets that home playoff game, anything can happen. So you're rooting like heck for USC to beat Notre Dame. That's one of the 2 big ones. There are 2 possible big games to root for if you're Tennessee. One of them is USC over Notre Dame. The other one, Texas A&M over Texas. If Texas A&M beats Texas, Tennessee moves up to the 8th seed as well. And Texas at 10-2 does not have the resume Tennessee has at 10-2. Both Notre Dame and Texas have lower strength of schedules than Tennessee. They would both be 10-2. Neither has better quality wins than Tennessee. Notre Dame's best win would be, funny enough, Texas A&M, who has 3 losses. Tennessee's best win is also against a 3-loss team, so you can't really claim anything. You have to go by strength of schedule. At that point, Tennessee would move ahead of Texas. So those are the 2 big ones. If both of those teams are upset, if one of those teams is upset, Tennessee is going to get a home playoff game. Now, the desirable path is a 6 or 5 seed in the college football playoff. Why is that the desirable path? You get a home game, and you get to face the 3 or 4 seed in the second round, which will not be the SEC or ACC or, the SEC or Big Ten champions, except maybe in this case with Georgia if they win it having 2 losses. So here's the real path. If all 4 happen, if Michigan beats Ohio State, Maryland beats Penn State, USC beats Notre Dame, Texas A&M beats Texas, and Tennessee wins, Tennessee's locked into the most desirable seed possible for the college football playoff, which is the 5th seed. Then they would host the lowest rated conference champion, who's only in because of the auto bid, likely a Big 12 champion, Arizona State or BYU, and likely go face Boise State in the second round. They would have a clear path to the semifinals, the Final Four. The 5 seed is the lucky one, is the desirable one. To get that, they need a giant upset of Michigan over Ohio State or Maryland over Penn State, and then some hope. To get to the 6th seed, they need one of those and some hope, if it's Michigan over Ohio State, that the committee will favor them. But the real focus is just to get a home game at this point. So USC over Notre Dame or Texas A&M over Texas is what you want.